Hello, welcome to the In Conversation in Mobility. With me, I have Pawan Mulukutla, who is the Executive Director of WRI India. I am Ganesh Shankar, founder and CEO of FluxGen Technologies. So, Pawan, tell me, as mobility is going to scale, what are the significant blind spots that we have in the whole mobility space? I mean, in the manufacturing of cars and various other automobiles, where do you see we failing apart in terms of resource management, whether or various energy, water, and various other resource?
Thank you, Ganesh. I think very relevant. I'll just set a little bit of context, right? Let's look at it from an energy transition perspective because mobility happens to be one of the industries which is transitioning, right? But there are simultaneously there's an industrial decarbonization that is happening, which is planned for. Then you have buildings being decarbonized. So there is agriculture sector which is being decarbonized. So we are actually in this, I would say, a mega transition which is going to last for several decades right now, right? And mobility is kind of at the very forefront of this energy transition because with the whole batteries and now with hydrogen and storage and everything, we are really looking at something very unique in terms of the transition. So couple of things that we need to be aware, right? Like, let's not forget that mobility at the end of the day is for people. I think we need to keep people at the center of this transition because it has to come down to the quality of life that we live in our cities. We are one of the countries which has very least urbanization, and we're going to see rapid urbanization over the next 20, 30 years. Our cities are going to become like one of the mega cities in the world, almost to the tune of 60, 70 million population. Bangalore is going to be so huge. Mumbai is already huge. So you're going to see all this expand. So while we're talking about mobility, I think multiple dimensions, Ganesh, you raised, right? From supply chain to manufacturing to everything. So I think two things we really have to go hand in hand. One is the growth part of it, the economy, right? Because we need to be at 8% kind of growth for a Vikasit Bharat 2047, and we really need to ensure that tech, innovation, and all these technologies are at the forefront, where India is just not adopting it but is driving this tech also. So we also need to find areas where we can compete, where we are able to export, where we are able to offer to the world. The other side is the ecology part of it. So to me, I feel the ecology and economy shouldn't be seen in isolation. They should be seen together. While we're talking about this growth, which is very much needed, we really need to uplift our GDP, and we have some numbers that we are really aspiring for. We also have a very huge role on how do we actually kind of design mobility in urban areas, in rural areas, and how do we bring quality of life at the center of this discourse. I think to me that is important, right? In urban areas, with the whole electrification, you'll be able to reduce your tailpipe emissions. But we need to understand that the transition to integrating renewable energy then really becomes very important. And how are we ensuring that we are able to charge this using RE? And now we also have, for the first time, our installed capacity is much more than our fossil fuels, right? So India is making strides so well. How do we leverage that? And then how do you bring battery storage as part of this conversation to really ensure that we're just not stopping tailpipe emission, but the entire life cycle emissions are clean? So I would really say that, quality of life, understanding that certain transitions are going to be longer, certain transitions are going to be smaller. How do you ensure that we don't stop the transition, recognizing that there are these blind spots that we really do. Also, let's ask ourselves, are we able to bring efficiencies into access, into affordability, into people? Because at the end of the day, it's not just about you and I moving, right? It is also about domestic help. Someone who can have access to transport systems needs to move. A person delivering milk, person delivering a newspaper. So when we talk about mobility, we really need to look at the entire gamut. When we're looking from all the way infrastructure like walking to cycling to public transportation to space for private vehicles, for shared mobility, then I feel that we are looking at an integrated system. And here I see all this transition, technology, digitalization as an enabler for this transition, Ganesh.
Oh, this is wonderful. I mean, I have a lot of my friends who have this debate on electric mobility. Is it really sustainable? and you're an expert in this field, right? I would like to get your thoughts. How actually you think about this question? There's nothing 100% sustainable, like 100% solving the climate crisis, but I'm sure you would probably be able to tell why that it is making a better choice in sustainable mobility when you use electric vehicle. And you also mentioned about ecology and economy should go hand in hand. So these questions are generally raised by a lot of ecologists. I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm no expert on ecology and economy, but I'll try to do justice to what you're asking. So I don't think we should really look at EV transition in isolation, right? You're seeing that India is actually exploring multiple alternative fuels technology for this transition. The trains have almost, we have huge electrification happening there, and your aeroplanes, again, there is whole exploration of sustainable aviation fuels that are being explored. But let's bring back, I'll just make the context a little smaller and really talk about urban mobility, right? Like mobility within our cities. See, we hit almost we have sold more than 7 million EVs in India today, right? We have almost close to 14,000 electric buses that are plying in India. So this, if your friends are saying that oh, is this transition happening? I actually don't have any doubt that the transition is happening. We have almost started hitting, I think, more than 8% penetration rate in new vehicle sales, right? But let's not forget that while we are talking about electrification as one of the available best preferred choices that we have, I think we need to be also open to what are the alternate mixes that are there, because at the end of the day, it's not just the technology that drives the economy, right? It's the geopolitics which will drive the economy as well. So we need to be a little bit sensitive to what's happening. We see a growing sense of protectionism in regimes around the world, and we also see the commitments that many countries in global north had committed to climate, where they said that they will support technology transfer, they will support climate finance. We are not seeing that levels. So I think India is entitled in a way to take its position to really say that we want to define our pathway in terms of how we actually balance this out. And in fact, actually, if you look at what has happened in the last 3-4 years, India has exactly been doing that in terms of, we are calling it a little bit of a new model of development in global south, where India is showing that, how you can actually have both ecology and economy go hand in hand. You see the investments that have happened in just related to e-mobility sector, more than 1 lakh crores we have seen just in the last 5 to 10 years. So this shows the seriousness of the government, right? Whether it is from the schemes or whether it is state governments really doing innovation and all that. So I strongly feel that this trend is here to stay. The at least in the road transport sector, it will be one of the major technologies that will continue to exist. But I'm sure that we'll also see newer technologies also probably come. We have seen that for freight, long haul, medium duty, for example, there is hydrogenized, there is fuel cell based hydrogen which are being tested even for buses. So we have to really look at very specifically. So it's very, Ganesh, it's not really so black and white, right? Because you have to look at the city dynamics, you have to look at the trip lengths of different modes and how do it perform, because in a city we may travel on a regular basis maybe 30 kilometers, right, on a daily basis, 30-40, but when you're stepping out of the city, in the region, in the interstate, then your distances increase. And that is what I was saying, that freight will have a different choice. Maybe a two-wheeler within a city will have a choice. But I'll just bring it back. We do all this transition, but let's ensure that it is affordable for people, it is accessible for people, and that to me is the center of how mobility can work in India. So it's not just simply unleashing some technologies and saying that okay, there are these technologies available for adoption, right? At the end of the day, what is the goal? Are people able to access jobs, healthcare, education, opportunities, recreation? That is what mobility is all about. And how do we bring that as centerpiece of discourse? And I'm sure, I've been talking to a lot of operators, manufacturers, and everyone is now talking about this language, which was missing big time because it was so heavy on technology that we forgot that at the end of the day, the technology has to serve people.
Absolutely. And I should tell you that I am an entrepreneur and I've been benefited by Nasscom in significant ways through their programs. So I'm tempted to ask you, as an entrepreneur, what are the opportunities that we will see for entrepreneurs or people who are aspiring to start up in this space? What are the white spaces that is going to be really big for them? So people who are listening to this can also start working on it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure many of them are already working on it, and there are several. But I would really say what we are going to see in the next 3 to 5 years, right? One is this whole freight electrification, because we are going to see thousands of electric, or let's put zero emission trucks, because I'm also saying electric plus hydrogen, whichever technology wins. So you're going to see a lot of movement around that. We're going to see a lot of electrification of buses, two wheelers, four wheelers. We already know what's really happening. We're going to see around the digital public infrastructure picking up big time as an enabler, right? Because I think we're building a lot of the stacks and systems in silos, but I think if we can bring something like based on certain standards and protocols, that's going to be an offer. We saw what UPI was able to do, right? Otherwise, we would take 47 years to get everyone into the banking system, and we just did it in 5 years, which is unprecedented in India's history, right? So that's the kind of transformation. So we are talking about technology from a transformative perspective. I don't think India can now afford to do this incremental usage of technology. So startups, when they're thinking about all these ideas, whether it's battery storage, whether it is this whole, let's look at connecting the dots, right? What is the problem you're trying to solve for people? And people here could be people as users of mobility services, or goods as for mobility, right? I think we really need to look at those as opportunities to solve for, and then you see that it's actually opens up a whole gamut of stuff that see, even today we have this issue of moving from one mode to another. We don't have access to information which is readily and easily available, right? We still need to book two different fares. Simple things which we are struggling, I think we can just see those to really solve for. But for me, I think the issue is not so much on the idea part and the opportunity part. It's in the discovery of business models for startups. At the end of the day, I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and, I work in a non-profit sector, and, the lens that we look at it would be very different. But for startups, they need to be able to really demonstrate that there is a viable business model, there is an opportunity to make money, there is a pie which either you're creating a new pie, or you're making the pie bigger, and then the startup model really works. I feel that is where a lot of startups really struggle, right? And I've seen in mobility space, we have worked with almost more than 100 startups over the last decade, and what we have seen is you really need to put people at the center, but also at the same time discover business models, right? Otherwise, it's pretty much very unsustainable. And in sector like mobility, if you're not looking at services or products, it's even more difficult. I mean, of course, they have their own challenges, but when you bring in mobility, you also have all this kind of, it intermixes a little bit with social challenges and issues, right? Because mobility purely cannot be seen as a technology that will solve mobility for everyone. It also has the social dimensions. What is the purchasing power? What is the affordability? Where it is going to be? Who is going to buy? Who is going to avail these services? And business model discovery to me is really very important, because are we able to solve that pain point, and are there customers who are willing to pay for it?
No, this is really important for entrepreneurs sitting here. Building business model innovation is as much important as technology innovation. So let me come to a more personal question. See, I read an environment encyclopedia very early in my life, and I'm 42. I still don't have a driving license. I cycle to work, and I always concerned about the choices that I make. Also, another reason, my mom suffers from bronchitis. During COVID time, she didn't cough at all. Otherwise, she coughs like hell, right? So it made me more. That was a validation that I should continue to cycle rest of my life, as long as I can. So I want to understand. Now we are facing challenges at various part of the country, especially Delhi, on air quality, and I want to understand from you, somebody like me who wants to make choices for family. I may not be able to continue cycling with my family, so I want to understand what are the better choices that I can make. in an urban setting as an individual for my mobility?
Yeah, no, excellent, very good question. I do want to distinguish between vehicle purchasing and vehicle usage. See, a lot of times people get confused that, oh, are we talking about should we buy or not? I'm saying yes, we need vehicles to be bought because that is how the economics of India also works. I mean, ours is one of the largest automobile industry, and indirectly and directly, millions of jobs are relying on that. What I'm saying is, how do you ensure that for your work trips you're making sustainable choices? See, on a weekend trip, you may say, okay, I will use my personal vehicle. For your errands, you may say, I may use a shared mobility. For your work trips, you'll say, okay, I'll use a combination of public transportation. So these choices should be available for any user, because it's not that we'll stick to only one mode throughout the week. Within a day itself, we are walking, sometimes you're getting onto a bus, you're using a metro, then you're driving your personal vehicle. So there are all these options that are available to us, and we use these options day in and day out without probably we are being conscious. What we're saying is that we need to be more aware when we are making choices, because if everyone brings it at the same time, that is when then you have the famous Bangalore jams, right? So the thinking should be that how do you create a model, incentives and disincentives for people to use different modes throughout the day. And of course, the underlying assumption is that there is good infrastructure which is really available to really use. Because today, we used to, cycle as a child, but today I would not want my children to go on the streets and start cycling because it's very unsafe. You will say, okay, where is this room for cyclists to do? So you don't want to create that kind of inequality in the system. As much as someone driving a private vehicle is entitled to road infrastructure, everyone is entitled to the infrastructure, right? So the infrastructure has to be built taking into these considerations, because today also bringing the dimension of health, we want people to be more active, they should walk, should cycle. So as we plan, the imagination that I have in future, that how our cities should be, is that you should create these 15-minute cities. We're able to literally walk and cycle, and maybe you shared mobility, and you are able to complete all your requirements. Maybe work trips are longer because the affordability of homes is always a challenge, and that's where then you do a combination. But I think the model that we are getting into, that getting everyone to drive, will not be able to, simply the transport economics just doesn't work. We cannot perennially keep increasing the supply, right? Like you can't keep building. How many roads can you build? Where can you really build? How many flyovers can you build? How many layers of flyovers can you build? Those are also required where they are required. But I think we need this right understanding and awareness, and I think citizens have to be part of this movement. In Delhi NCR, in that area, transport emissions are the largest source of emissions for the poor AQI. And while government has to get into stringent regulations and fuel efficiency norms and all that, but the challenge is, you know, if citizens are not aware and are not willing to be part of this changes, then it becomes unpopular for any government to really implement, right? So I think there is a need for total awakening of not just the government in terms of implementing its policies, but for citizens also to be aware that, yeah, fine, this is in the bigger interest for the society that we are doing, right? There was this whole phase out of 15-year-old vehicles. It became voluntary, not mandatory. And then people were saying that, oh, I'm having problem with this, and then there was this whole social media narrative that was built where people were getting upset. Now see the price that we are paying for it, right? So these are very challenging trade-offs, Ganesh, very easy, easier said, easier to talk, but very tough to solve for. But this is where I feel, partnerships, engaging different actors in the society, right? Whether it's citizen groups, resident welfare associations, manufacturers, operators, government. We all have to really come together to design. There's not going to be a day when suddenly someone will say the air quality has become really good, except for the weather gods, which will happen now in Jan, where the air will get cleaned, and then we'll be back to this conversation in October. That's how I really see it.
No, thank you so much for that very insightful thought. And now I'm actually keen on asking you a question because Nasscom, of course, has biggest audience in corporates. What can corporates do, and what should they be cognizant about while I mean, if you consider even industry including while they're building new cars or new vehicles, new mobility solution, what should be looked into? I mean, what do you think is today underlooked while making this sustainability transition?
Yeah. No, I think many of the automobile manufacturers now have an EV portfolio also, right? Like many of them are entering the market. They clearly see a business case. So that is really happening, which is really good. So that you are actually seeing more. Of course, in two-wheeler space, there's a lot of models, and in cars also you're seeing many, and then we'll see slowly in the additional sectors as well. I think I'll come to the corporate mobility itself, right? I think corporates have a huge role to play and there is a big opportunity. How do we make usage of public transport attractive for your employees? I think that's the question corporate should be asking, right? There are so much incentives. You're given easy access to loans to buy private vehicles, right? Every corporate has a program running. Simple question, why can't corporates run programs to say that we will actually make ambassadors and stars out of people who actually use public transportation, and there they can create this whole innovation. And that's where I feel, you can create dashboards, you can create actually tie-ups with programs which encourage this kind of participation. You can actually tie up with startups which are developing last mile for your metro, and in fact many corporates are doing that. So that is the good news, right? We have been working with corporates in Bangalore, specifically in around outer ring road, the Orca, Electronic City, and many more. They actually want to solve for this, so which is really good part. But I think slowly we really also need to get into changing the HR policies for related to employee transportation. And many corporates, once you see some of these big ones doing it, I feel there'll be a huge change in how corporates actually are looking at transportation. See, they already do a lot in a way, right? They actually engage in leasing buses or purchasing buses, providing those options, make parking little difficult. It's a real estate that you're giving it away freely to all your employees. So make it little difficult, but also ensure that the choices that the employees are getting are attractive enough. That's number two. And number three is we really need to look at the policies in more depth on how do we make usage of public transport combined with last mile more attractive and easier, where corporates are forthcoming and designing schemes and policies around that.
This is very interesting. I mean, I'm tempted to ask you, if I cycle to work, there's a possibility to give some incentives.
Carbon credits. Like
Okay.
you are saving the city, right? In a way, a citizen who is really supporting the city, how do we actually recognize them? I think we really, that's what I'm saying, right? Innovation can come here also in the financing, like fintechs and startups which are working in this space. Can they really look at these markets, that how do you actually make it interesting and create a viable case that, recognize the people who use public transport? Recognition in the sense not that we are celebrating them, but, create a business model and incentive where, you feel that, yes, I'm contributing, of course, as a responsible citizen with social consciousness, but also make it attractive.
Yeah, I would love to actually cycle for 5 kilometers and that be metered, and make sure that ride gives me currency to take my metro journey.
Absolutely. See, these are the kind of models that need to come.
Yeah, I hope with WRI you are able to influence the government, and maybe will entrepreneur looking into this might find an idea out of it. So in conclusion, I want to say, you think sustainability wise, the mobility is playing a significant role,
No,
right? And
absolutely. I think it's in fact one of the sectors which has demonstrated success, how it can be done. And I'm sure that there is good intent and will across all stakeholders. So it's I've been in this mobility sectors for more than 25 years, and last 15 years I've been working with various stakeholders, right? And I've seen such genuine interest and concern to really solve for mobility. But I again always bring it back. It cannot happen, charity cannot happen through an empty bowl, right? We really need to, even when you're creating social enterprises and startups in this space, I think we really need to create sustainable models for those businesses to survive, right? Like make it attractive, make it in a model that is designed that, there is possibility for them to also grow. See, we always, when we come down, we always think that, you have to sacrifice and you really have to do all that. No, I think ecology, economy go hand in hand. We have to discover models that actually make this really work together. And there are models that we are really seeing that actually are happening right now. Otherwise, why would electrification even begin to happen, right? To really ask that question.
No, this is so helpful, Pawan, for all our audience, and I am so glad that you shared some very important points on how sustainable mobility is actually not a pipe dream. It can actually be achieved. And one of the things that I like the most as we conclude is it's just not what we ask the government or what you ask the country to do. What can you do to the country in terms of your choices, right? I think that kind of felt really great to me also when I heard you. So thank you so much, all of you, for listening to this podcast, and stay tuned to the In Conversation sessions by Nasscom. Thank you so much.